An investigation has been launched into Devon and Cornwall police after it was revealed the Plymouth gunman had his weapon taken away, only for it to be returned just a few weeks ago. Jake Davison's shotgun and firearms certificate were confiscated last December following an allegation of assault. On Thursday evening, the 22-year-old killed 5 people, including his own mother, before turning the gun on himself. A 3-year-old girl and her father were also amongst the dead. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt reports.
On a balmy summer's evening, a motorist's dashboard camera caught a chilling moment in an unfolding horror. A figure crouches over a shot victim, a woman who later died in hospital. Down the road, no one else seemed aware of what was happening. 2 weeks earlier, on his own YouTube channel, gunman Jake Davison was clearly a troubled young man.
I just don't have any willpower to do anything anymore. You know? I know a lot of people say, oh, that's weak-minded, that's pathetic, but dude, it's like how many years I've been working out, how many years I've been wanting and dealing with all these frustrations.
Davison's neighbours soon learned how he had dealt with his frustrations.
Just after 6, my son was up there, obviously with his friends at the dog park. He said he heard a big bang. He said he don't know if somebody got shot or stabbed, so he come running back to me, told me, we ran up. Times we got up there, police were on scene, and obviously they were doing CPR on some person, don't know if it's a lady or a man.
I heard a bit of a commotion out the back and helicopters coming. An helicopter came over and landed in the field. And then there was another helicopter outside hovering and then going around. And there was police cars going up and down the street and sirens everywhere. And all of a sudden they all went up here, up Biddock Drive behind me, and just literally covered the place.
Crane operator Jake Davison shot dead 5 victims and wounded 2 others. His first victim was his mother Maxine. She was 51. He kicked open her door before shooting her. For 12 minutes he roamed nearby streets. He shot dead 3-year-old Sophie Martin and her father Lee. He killed 59-year-old Stephen Washington. Then he shot Kate Shepherd, who died in hospital. She was 66. The bodybuilder shot himself dead as armed police arrived. Davison's shotgun was taken off him last year after an assault allegation, but police gave it back to him a month ago. The chief constable said it wasn't unusual to take away a gun and then return it.
We do take firearms licences away from people when they come to notice of police or family members raise concerns, later to restore them once we're assured. That will form part of the inquiry.
On social media, Jake Davison talked about guns and watched videos about guns. Witnesses said he killed his victims with a pump-action shotgun. Today, police will renew appeals for more witnesses, and they'll continue to investigate Jake Davison's background to understand what prompted the shootings. But they know a clear motive may never emerge. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Plymouth.
Well, a vigil was held in Plymouth last night for the victims of the shooting, and there has been an outpouring of grief, with churches opening their doors to offer a space for prayer and reflection. Ashna Hurineg reports from Plymouth.
These families have witnessed unspeakable horrors. They are all grieving here. For those that witnessed the attack, like 13-year-old Lily, it's a haunting memory.
I didn't expect it at all.
How are people feeling today?
I told my cousin not to worry about it. He said he's not at all. And then I feel a little bit okay. I had a nightmare last night about it. I had a dream that I got killed.
In shock and shaken, just like Abby, who's lived in this part of Plymouth her whole life. As a mum of 3, she can't stop thinking about the youngest victim, a 3-year-old girl.
That could have been my son, or my daughter, or my other son that got shot. And it's like, now I won't go up ladders with him. I'm terrified to go up at him because it could happen again. Like, no one can turn and say, nah, it'll never happen again. No one thought it would happen the first time. Can't turn and say it's not going to happen the second time or third time. because no one knows.
A thought too raw to erase. Some are seeking support and others are finding solace in sharing.
But most importantly, let us pray for the souls of the faithful departed.
Healing will take time.
These things aren't settled quickly, are they? For some people, their lives have been changed forever through what's happened, and the community itself certainly will take some time to come to terms with all that we've experienced.
24 hours after their deaths, hundreds gathered in their memory. Collective silence allowed for collective reflection, but disbelief lingers. The loss of the 12th of August will be forever remembered by this city as one of the darkest days in Plymouth's history. Ashna Harinag, Sky News in Plymouth.
Well, videos posted on YouTube by the gunman indicate he identified with the Incel, or involuntary celibate movement. It's an online subculture involving men who express resentment and hostility to women. Our Home Affairs correspondent Mark White reports.
They do not want, need or find average men attractive.
From his video posts, it's clear Plymouth gunman Jake Davison was deeply resentful of his lack of success with the opposite sex.
In this day and age, women have nothing but options.
At the very least, his videos show sympathy and understanding for those involved in the so-called Incel movement of involuntary celibate men who are deeply hostile towards those, particularly women, who are sexually active. The Incel movement first rose to international prominence in 2014 when Elliot Rodger murdered 6 students at the University of California, all because he couldn't secure a relationship.
I've been forced to endure an existence of loneliness, rejection, and unfulfilled desires.
In Canada in 2018, Alec Minassian, who boasted of being an incel, used a van to knock down and kill 10 people in Toronto.
They are coming together in forums and promote really deeply dehumanizing rhetoric towards women, a sense of their own entitlement, a sense of injustice.
In the UK, recent separate investigations prevented these 2 men linked to the Incel movement from carrying out violent action. Anwar Druick and Oliver Bell had both spoken of their humiliation and frustration with the opposite sex and had attempted to make explosives. If Plymouth killer Jake Davison was in any way motivated by the Incel movement, it will be of huge concern to authorities as they try to track this growing subculture of young men whose sexual loneliness and rage is increasingly manifesting in violence. Mark White, Sky News.
British troops have been deployed to Afghanistan to bring home UK nationals and embassy staff. The Taliban have now taken control of more than 2/3 of Afghanistan's provincial capitals in a situation the UN has warned is spinning out of control. It comes amid fears the assault on Kabul could just be days away. Well, this map shows Afghanistan 4 months ago when the US started to withdraw. The area is controlled by the Taliban in red and by the government in blue. You can see the change now with the government areas in blue shrinking. Kabul is almost surrounded, the Taliban taking control of Kala-i-Pul, Herat's capital, and Kandahar. If we put the map side by side, you can see the speed of the Taliban advance even more clearly. Now, as well as Afghanistan's second biggest city, Kandahar, falling, Lashkargah in Helmand province has also been overrun. Our chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey reports from Kabul.
For thousands upon thousands of people, this is certainly the most important airport in the world right now. With the Taliban advances and all routes to the capital under their control, Hamid Karzai Airport is the only way to get supplies in. More importantly, it's the only way out. The American embassy that dominates the centre of town will move its operations to the airport joining US and British military. British embassy staff will follow suit. Short of a rethink, it is the endgame. Impressive-looking Afghan army convoys still crisscross Kabul, but recent events suggest it's a veneer. The military has capitulated. Thousands of embassy staff, NGOs and foreign nationals will start their journeys out from the green zone and the fortified mansions that have been home for 2 decades. Passing Kabul residents who have no choice but to stay, they'll all travel on the airport road, guarded by British and American soldiers to the gates. Finally inside, they'll be processed and prepared for departure behind the high blast walls and gun turrets of the airport complex. Planning for the exit is underway. It needs to be. The Taliban are closing in. So the Taliban have now taken Logar province. Its borders are only about 37 miles down the road behind me, and it feels inevitable now that Kabul will fall. The city is very much divided between those who can leave, or at least hope they can leave, and those who know they can't. It means this place is very tense now. Crowding around computers, manned by experts, groups of men are struggling to fill out the application forms for Afghans who have worked for the international community. Security guards, translators, and a whole array of jobs. The Taliban will kill them. These visas are their only passage to safety. But the process has been slow and time is running out. Ali worked as a US Special Forces translator from 2011. He still hasn't got permission to travel. He's representative of so many who are so desperate.
We serve for the American forces, we serve for the US and ISAF forces, for the coalition forces. They have to take care about us. It is our turn to be helped. We help them, you know, we save their lives. We were the people who communicate with 2 cultures. Otherwise, without interpreters, they did nothing.
And so now you're abandoned and scared?
Yes.
The vast majority of ordinary Afghans are slowly but surely preparing themselves for the retaking of their city by the Taliban. On high ground in Kabul, the famous kite runners know all too well their fun will likely be stopped by the Taliban. As that day nears, the skies reverberate to the sounds of helicopters, war machines of a war that seems lost. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Kabul.
Our Foreign Affairs editor, Deborah Haynes, who joins us now. Look, with all of this, we know the government is taking it seriously. We know there's been a Cobra meeting. Is it likely to lead to any sort of change in our current policy?
Well, yes, Boris Johnson yesterday had that emergency meeting, which is a sign of the absolute crisis that this government is facing when they're looking at the Afghan government that they've supported for the last 20 years, crumbling in the face of this Taliban advance. But from the words of the Prime Minister last night, it looks like there's no change of policy. The belief, the understanding is that there is no military solution that they can impose on Afghanistan. Clearly, the Taliban takeover now seems inevitable. But it's interesting to note that this just wasn't what officials were saying even a week ago. A week ago, the head of the UK's armed forces, General Sir Nick Carter, wrote an opinion piece in The Times saying it's too soon to write off the Afghan security forces, and the key is to keep hold of the provincial capitals. And he named Herat and also that southern city of Kandahar. Within days, both of them, as well as many others, had fallen. It does seem that this Taliban advance had not been predicted by even the most senior and deep experts on Afghanistan. And that really does call into question what were officials thinking that their plans in Afghanistan were doing in terms of a long-term effect. We know from the Defence Secretary, the UK Defence Secretary, that the UK is deeply unhappy with the US decision to call time on Afghanistan and to pull troops out in the way that Joe Biden did, coming on the back of then President Trump's decision to strike a deal with the Taliban last year. But it does seem as though, for the UK at least, they are resigned to the fact that they aren't going to be able to reverse this tide. And so now the focus really is about safety, about ensuring the security of British diplomats, other British nationals in Kabul. We've got 600 troops you mentioned, heading that way to help with this evacuation, on top of 3,000 US forces who are also going to be in Kabul over the next couple of days, helping with the US exit. US officials very mindful of the comparison that is increasingly being made to the final few days in Saigon in 1975, wanting to avoid that image of helicopters off the roof of the embassy that was such a damning image of that adventure, of that venture in Vietnam so many decades ago. Clearly, the effect, the impact of these failures in Afghanistan are going to haunt the presidency of Joe Biden for the rest of his time, I believe.
OK, Deborah, thank you. Now, NHS bosses say tens of thousands of people could be putting their lives at risk by not coming forward for cancer checks. And research suggests it's because people don't want to burden the NHS in the wake of the pandemic. But they say they're ready and open, and they're urging anyone with symptoms to come forward. Well, let's talk to the NHS National Clinical Director for Cancer, Professor Peter Johnson. Good morning to you. I mean, look, I know in I think it's June, is it, this last June, we've seen a huge increase in the number of cancer treatments being carried out, and you think that's because people have been leaving it for 12 months?
Good morning, Stephen. Yes, absolutely. The NHS obviously has been working very hard to make sure that people who might have symptoms of cancer can get checked out. And I think we saw about 250,000 people in June to check them out, and about 27,000 people started on cancer treatment. So things are open, things are up and running. But we do know that over the last year or so, we've seen around 10% less people than we would have expected for treatment with cancer. And that means that people are out there and that they may have symptoms that they haven't been bringing forward. And we know that people are understandably cautious and worried that the NHS is under pressure. But equally, it's very, very important that if they have got symptoms, if they've got things like discomfort in the stomach, diarrhea that's been going on for 3 weeks, blood in their pee, even just the once, or they've got a cough that's been going on for 3 weeks or more, that we really want them to come forward, because it is so important. Because if we catch cancer early, that's when we have the best possible chance of curing it.
It's part of the issue here, not just that, I mean, people don't want to be a burden on the NHS, and we get that. But the fact that if you've got a symptom which you could maybe think was something else, it's easier to ignore than trying to get even an initial GP appointment. I mean, they're not easy to get hold of at the moment.
My colleagues in general practice are working incredibly hard. Of course, they're rolling out the vaccine programme. They're seeing lots of people, and many things are not normal. A lot of consultations are taking place over the telephone. But they are also very committed to making sure that people, if they have got symptoms, can be seen. So you will be seen, and it may not be in quite the normal way. You may need to start with a telephone call, but people will be seen. And it's really important that if people have got symptoms, that they do come forward, because if we don't know about them, we can't help them. But if we do know, as I say, the sooner we know, the better, because that's when the chance of being cured is highest.
Is part of the issue here that people aren't always aware what the symptoms are?
I think that's right. It's surprising that around 2/3 of people aren't aware that prolonged bloating or pain in the stomach could be a sign of early cancer. And I think it is so important that if things aren't right for you, and people know what's normal for them, generally speaking, and if you're not right, please do come and see us, because we really do want to get you checked out.
Are you hopeful things can get back on track comparatively quickly? I mean, is the system equipped to cope with an increase in people if that happens?
Well, we've prioritised the investigation and treatment of cancer throughout the pandemic. And although, of course, things were very disrupted early in 2020, we rapidly got them back on track during the summer of last year. And we saw a much smaller effect on the numbers of people coming forward and the numbers of people starting treatment during the wave of coronavirus that we saw in January. And so we're seeing record numbers at the moment. And it is really important to emphasise that the service is there for people if they need it.
OK, Professor, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, almost 600 people attempted to cross the English Channel on Thursday, and that's a new daily record. The Home Office says more than 11,000 people have now crossed the Dover Strait since the start of the year. At least 38 people have died in flash floods in northern Turkey, which have destroyed bridges, closed roads and cut off electricity to hundreds of villages. It's the second natural disaster to hit Turkey this month, with wildfires ravaging the southern coastal regions. Oh, this is an interesting one. This is a cave lion cub that was alive 28,000 years ago. It's been discovered preserved in Siberian permafrost. It's a female cub. Scientists are amazed at just how well preserved it is and think it may even contain traces of its mother's milk. Now, with the last of Team GB's athletes back in the UK, it's time to celebrate. A weekend-long homecoming will take place across the country, celebrating the achievements of the team, starting with an event today at the London Stadium. Decent weather for a party, for a celebration, though, Kirsty?
It's always weather to celebrate.
Oh, quite right.
Yes, always. But actually, yeah, it is looking pretty decent in the London area today. And for many of us, there is some dry and bright weather around. But I have to say, we do have some pesky weather fronts moving in off the Atlantic. And that does mean we're going to see some cloudy skies and some outbreaks of rain trying to nudge in through this weekend.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. For many of us, it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag of weather this weekend. We've got weather fronts pushing in off the Atlantic, bringing with it some cloudier skies and outbreaks of rain already sitting in across parts of southern Ireland. That's going to start pushing its way a little bit further east through the rest of the day. So make the most of any sunshine this morning. We have got some showers again across parts of Scotland, quite breezy here. The showers, though, should be a little bit lighter than yesterday and will start to ease as the wind eases through the day. Now, we'll see the cloud thickening up through parts of Wales, the Midlands, later on northern England as the weather fronts slide in from the west. In the sunshine across the southeast today, could see 23 or 24, so actually feeling fairly pleasant. But we do have the cloudier skies moving into northern England and then also Northern Ireland. And the weather front grinds to a halt here overnight. It's really just fairly light rain and drizzle. More showers coming in across southern Ireland later, and also the far north of Scotland and the Northern Isles could see some showers overnight. Bit of a grey start on Sunday. We've got further outbreaks of rain around. Eventually, we'll start to see some brighter skies pushing in from the north.
Now, the United States is accelerating efforts to evacuate people from Kabul this weekend as the Taliban continues its advance towards the Afghan capital. President Biden has said he does not regret the decision to withdraw troops from the country, despite critics calling it a significant misjudgment. Well, let's talk to Alistair Campbell, who is the government's Director of Communications under Tony Blair at the outset of the Afghan war 20 years ago. Morning to you, Alistair. I mean, 20 years on, does this look like it's wiping away everything and anything that was achieved?
Well, there's certainly the danger that that's where it ends, and I think that's why people have to accept that this is to a very large extent the responsibility of those who now appear to be walking away. And I hear what Joe Biden says when he says it's not capitulation, and when he says that he has no regrets. But I think it's impossible not to regret that what is happening on the ground now is happening. And I was listening yesterday to an interview with the Dutch head of the organisation Action Against Hunger, and he was being asked, are we witnessing could there be a humanitarian catastrophe? And he says, I'm looking outside the window and it's happening now. So I get completely why the British media will focus on getting British nationals out, the American media will focus on getting American nationals out, but it's what's happening on the ground there now that is utterly horrific, and we're kidding ourselves if we don't think that the consequences of that are going to be with us for a very, very long time and have a direct impact on our security and our strategic interests.
I mean, in some respects, I don't know if people are necessarily thinking we need to get our people out urgently and that's our priority. I think an awful lot of people are thinking the best part of 500 young lives, young British lives were lost. And was it worth it?
Well, I think obviously if you're one of the families of the 457 British or 2,400 American soldiers who lost your lives, you're bound to be thinking, well, why did we do that? And all I think we can say to that is actually that Afghanistan did make, for all the problems, massive progress. And that is now being put at risk. And so, yes, I think you can make the case that those who fought and died in Afghanistan were fighting for something good, and they did make massive progress. But this now is just, I think, such a catastrophe that's unfolding. And look, you have to remember about Joe Biden, he was always a bit of an Afghan skeptic. If you go back to 2009-10, he was a massive opponent of the so-called surge under President Obama when 30,000 troops went in. He always felt that the strategy should be one of counterinsurgency and counter-terrorism rather than nation building. Now, it's true, as Boris Johnson said last night, there is no clear military solution right now on offer, but that doesn't mean there aren't other things that we can and should be doing. And I just can't see the urgency. Where's all the kind of discussion going on between the world leaders? What are NATO? I heard reports from some of the smaller countries at the recent NATO conference that when they were trying to raise what will happen if this Trump deal is followed through and there's just a kind of complete pullout, they said they were met by kind of eyebrow rolling of some of the bigger countries who just felt, we've been here 20 years, we've got to get out. And so I think there's an awful lot that can be done, that should be done. And the humanitarian side alone, I think we're really going to see the folly of the decision to get rid of DFID, the Department for International Development, because the humanitarian fallout from this is going to be enormous.
Well, what can be done in practical terms? Because you say a lot of this comes down to the negotiations that President Trump carried out with the Taliban. Of course, people now turning around and saying, well, you can't believe a word they say in negotiations because they're going back on that agreement now, as we're seeing. So if there is no immediate military strategy we can employ, what can be done?
Well, the only thing you can do, you have to have a military and a diplomatic strategy going on at the same time. Now, what's made that so difficult, certainly in the short term and possibly in the medium and long term as well, because let's just be honest, if this does go the whole way, and it's obvious, it seems to me that what the Afghan authorities are doing, and it's sort of thinking, right, well, we have to defend Kabul at all costs, but let's just say that doesn't happen, then let's not pretend that this is not going to be a problem that affects all of us. And you started, rightly, your report by going back 20 years ago. I mean, we do have such short memories. Why did this whole thing start? It started because of the link with the terrorist networks, which then committed the atrocity of 9/11, which we've all had to live with the consequences since. So I do think on the humanitarian front, there has to be far greater urgency. And I really, the people that I kind of sort of lie awake at night worrying about are the people who have been living there in Afghanistan, Afghans who helped the Brits, who helped the Americans. Now, is enough being done to make sure that they're safe, to help them get out? Will they actually be offered any kind of proper exile? So these are all things that require the kind of urgency that, I just didn't see last night. It's all very well for Boris Johnson to call a Cobra meeting. And just because we can't do everything doesn't mean that there is nothing that we can be doing right now. And I think there has to be a mobilization of where's the United Nations? I've seen statements from Guterres, but are these guys meeting? Are they sitting down, going through all of the problems that we're facing, short, medium and long term, because they are enormous?
Alistair Campbell, we've got to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
OK, let's see what the weather's going to do for you today. Good morning, Kirsty.
Good morning, Stephen. It's very formal.
It is very formal. It is. I'm feeling quite formal this morning. Overcast today?
For some places, yeah. We've got weather fronts that are moving in off the Atlantic. So at the moment, the weather in the UK is still pretty unsettled. But there will be some spells of sunshine around. And I'm hoping that we might see some warmth in that sunshine as well today.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. We've got a low pressure sitting out in the Atlantic here, and the weather fronts associated with that are spinning into the UK and Ireland today, bringing with it fairly cloudy skies and some light rain and drizzle, occasionally heavy at places, but for most it's just persistent cloud that's going to start sliding in from the west. Now we do have sunshine and showers for Scotland. It's quite breezy here. The showers not as heavy as yesterday, and they'll ease as the wind eases too. For much of Ireland, rather cloudy with the rain starting to slide in here. It could be heavy in the south, and across Wales, the Midlands and northern England we'll start to see the skies clouding over as some outbreaks of rain start to nudge in here. The south and east of England, generally speaking, looking largely dry with bright or sunny spells and temperatures up to around 23 or 24. The cloud with the rain on it grinds to a halt across northern England and Northern Ireland overnight, and a bit of a grey start for many tomorrow.
OK, time for the papers this morning with the journalist Badisha and former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Morning both. Badisha, let's kick straight off with the Financial Times, should we? I was just talking to Alistair Campbell about the Taliban situation in Afghanistan. I mean, it makes a very concerning reading.
It makes for extremely worrying reading, and the FT are looking into the socio-politics of it, but they are warning us about the facts, which is that the Taliban have surrounded the capital, which is Kabul. They've also captured Kandahar, which is the second largest city. And overall, they've gained control of at least 14 of the country's 34 provincial capitals. At the same time, leaders from the Taliban are in Qatar right now speaking to leaders of other nations, including China, India and the UK. And NATO have issued a statement saying that they want a political solution. But my question is, what exactly would a political solution be in this context? You know what it would be? It would be the Taliban being put into power, backed by international forces and backed by other countries, because what we're hearing from actual Afghans who fought the Taliban over the last 20-odd plus years is that their own leadership are stepping back. I'm not saying that they're letting the Taliban in, but the kind of military and political defense and kickback and resistance hasn't yet started up yet. And what Dawn said in a previous slot is absolutely true, which is my worry is not about the US and the UK embassy staff, who indeed are being evacuated right now. It's also about the millions of ordinary Afghan women, children and men who are there in the country. And this is really not a debate about whether the Allied invasion 20 years ago was right or wrong. If you look at the history of the country, there have been successive wars and occupations and elements of stability and fragile statehood. So we're not on a war footing yet, but there's very good reason for this story to be on the front page of all of the newspapers.
Yeah, no, that's true. Talking of front pages, on the Telegraph front page, Dawn, looking at this, I don't even want to name him really, this killer in Plymouth.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good news morning, is it really, in any sense, Stephen? Every single paper is quite rightly covering this story. I just want to give a special mention to the Daily Mirror, which actually have concentrated on the victims rather than the killer. And, you know, quite right not to name this 22-year-old creature who has killed 6 people in the mass shooting, including a 3-year-old little girl who was shot on the street as she pushed her little pram down the road, a little toy pram. And your heart aches. I mean, it's just absolutely chilling to read the details of what's happened in this hideous case. But the one element that the Telegraph and a lot of the other papers have picked up on about Stephen is the fact that this man, and I don't like to use the term man because he's not, was a woman-hating incel extremist. Now, I was not really aware that this thing even existed, but it's members of this group. They're involuntary celibate because they're young men. They're hostile to women because they feel they're so unattractive they'll never get a partner. So they take it out on women. They have this hatred of women for their own inadequacies. It's absolutely chilling. And this creature had a YouTube channel website where he would post his hideous views. And there were so many men, Stephen, flocking to this before it was taken down, saying this creature was a hero for what he had done, saying, yeah, women sort of like, you know, we're not condoning what he's done, but, you know, women, it's all it's all women's fault that we are like we are, that we are forced to be celibate. I didn't even know this existed. It's absolutely shocking. And, you know, the chilling thing is that 6 mass shootings in America, killing 46 people by young men who have similar feelings. And it is quite horrific that 5 innocent people have lost their lives because of this man's hatred of women, and especially, obviously, his first victim was his own mum. I mean, it's just hideous, Stephen. And you know, thoughts and prayers. It's a cliche, but with those that have lost loved ones and everybody in Plymouth who must be absolutely stunned by this.
It's extremely hard to get your head around, isn't it? It really is. OK, let's change tack. Have a look at the Express, Bodisha, and the ongoing concerns with childhood obesity.
Yeah, this is a longer range story rather than another terrible piece of news that's in the headlines, but it is something we need to think about. So councils are now pointing out to the government that childhood obesity rates have risen by a huge percentage in the last 5 years. They've gone up 60% in the last 5 years in type 2 diabetes. And they're pointing out that the main cause of type 2 diabetes in the young is actually obesity. And they remind the government that the government had pledged to halve the numbers of obese kids by the end of the decade. Now, that means we have sort of 9 years, maybe 8.5 years left on that. So that's the main story. And of course, the newspapers always go with the spectacular headline and the spectacular image. But the proposed suggestions, I think they're very constructive. They're all about having healthy eating initiatives in schools. They're all about having community sports facilities and play centres. And they're all about being mindful and educated about sports, fitness, food and health. So I think that despite the spectacular headlines about obesity and child diabetes, actually the proposed solutions are very workable and just need some government investment.
We just need... Do you know what? People want freedom of choice and all, and I get that. I totally get that. But sometimes we need to have some of the things taken away from us. Because I'm a dreadful one for snacking and for crisps and peanuts and all the rest of it. And it's very hard. If it wasn't there, I wouldn't do it. But it's very hard to say no to myself at times. What's this about a hermit jab, Dawn, in the Express?
Oh, I love this story, Stephen, because it's quite light-hearted take on obviously what is a very, very serious debate about the vaccine rollout around the world. And just another shout out for the British government. We've done exceptionally well on this, and just for once we should be proud of that. This is a story and it's about a chap called Panta Petrovic, who has been a hermit living in a cave in Serbia for the past 20 years. Now, he emerged last year and discovered, bless him, that this pandemic was raging throughout the world. He knew nothing about it.
We're out of time, but I'm glad to hear he's got his jab. Thank you both.